Phoebe Schecter, thank you very much for taking the time out to join us on the Irish NFL show. This couple of weeks now with the NFL coming over to London, it must feel like your Olympics or something like that because you've built such a reputation of being such a great advocate for American football on this side of the pond. And I imagine you must feel tremendously excited for the three games you're going to experience now over the next few weeks.
Oh, I can't wait. I mean, this time of year, like you're saying, it's like my Olympics, my Christmas. Just there's so much joy, so much excitement. To be honest, for me, a lot of people that I know from the States, from the NFL world are coming over, so I get to be reunited with them. There's just nonstop noise about this sport, and it's really cool because so many more people are getting involved in it, asking questions about it, which is ultimately what we want. How many people want to come engage with the sport? Even my family over here who've never been to an NFL game, we're going to go to their first ever NFL game.
That's the point actually I want to talk to you about because obviously I think you have a pretty unique perspective because you're so involved with NFL in the UK and in Europe. But of course you're from the United States. You've come from a community in America. Do you think that these events are really taking bigger prominence and people are really paying more attention to what's happening internationally now year in year? Not only with the NFL games on in Europe, but with flag football growing as a sport as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a multi-prong approach ultimately, right? Whether we're talking about the international home markets, now having 19 countries represented with 25 different teams, or like you're saying, the flag football side of things. A lot of times that's brought together people who perhaps didn't necessarily know or have much interest in the NFL, but now you're playing flag football. You start to see it's at the Pro Bowl. There's way more people engaging around that conversation. I think there's just so many layers to it. I mean, NFL Academy, we've got one here in the UK, but also starting in Australia. I just feel like there is not a better time to be a part of this sport because it's growing at such a rapid pace. And so many people are just excited to kind of learn more about it. It's like this really cool, it's like a little cool Rubik's Cube, right? Where you just want to keep playing, trying to figure it out. It's this new toy, and the NFL never fails to deliver.
It's actually funny that I started off by describing this week being like your Olympics, but of course, flag football is going to be in the actual Olympics in a couple of years' time, and I think that's really built a big level of excitement. I don't know, even when you made an appearance on Good Morning Football as well this week. Fantastic to see you there flying the flag, for all of us European NFL fans on that program as well. I mean, considering that's obviously a very international centerpiece, the Olympic Games, and the fact that a lot of NFL players are interested in playing it, the fact that it is now growing in focus in terms of how men and women in places like Ireland, the UK, are playing the game. Do you really think that is something which is probably driving momentum in terms of how much people care about the grassroots of the game as well?
Yeah, absolutely, because it's an entry point into this space, right? I think for a lot of people, you see the NFL on Sundays, but there's still a lot of barriers to entry in terms of whether just understanding the rules or if you're trying to play 11-a-side football. I mean, obviously, you guys have some great teams over in Ireland. We do here as well. I think that flag just is a really nice kind of fast-paced version of the sport. And, for families, it's a great way for people to start their kids young, get them engaged. I mean, I think all of us saw the kind of Jalen Hurts teaser for LA 2028. I mean, there's no way to not get hyped about that. Plus, that whole conversation around will NFL players be able to play in the Olympics? So I think that they only benefit each other. And ultimately, a lot of people are getting involved in flag and finding their way through to contact from a playing perspective and from a fandom perspective.
Just moving on to the NFL games on in London, as we were talking, we're only days away from the Jets playing against the Vikings. We can look forward again afterwards to seeing the Bears and the Jaguars play, and then the Patriots and the Jaguars play the following week. But what I really like about these games in how they've developed is the fact that it's gone from fans of all teams going in there and feeling like a bit of a mix to more and more you actually see the partisanship and how much passion people have for their own team being in the stands. And I think it's fair to say that at the Buffalo Bills, I know a team that's close to your heart, really showed that last year in London. And I'm sure, as you're probably sitting here, we could probably expect again, considering the fan bases that are be playing, or we will see in Tottenham over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and what's really cool about this first game is it's two of our international home market teams, right? So the Vikings and the Jets. The Bears are also a home team for us this year, who are another international home market. So that's already an incredible step forward. The Vikings have been here before, and they've always found a way to leave us with a memorable finish, whether we're looking back at the double doink when they were here playing the Saints. I think that was a literal kind of historic moment that we can look back to, which is super cool. And this is the first time we've had a 4-0 team coming over internationally to play. I think the Ravens were 2-0 when they were here. So this is a really big deal. And then that's not even talking about Aaron Rodgers coming back over here, right? So like the stardom, the noise, you've got Caleb Williams, a first round draft pick, first overall the next week. I mean, these games used to kind of just something that happened, but now it's a true competitive kind of in your face, every single play matters, and it's really great, and the players love to be a part of it, right? The teams, they feel like they've really kind of established themselves here.
It's really interesting you mentioned that, because this matchup between the Jets and the Vikings, it's not just a showpiece. It really matters to how both of these teams will end up in their divisions. And I'm going to start with the Vikings you mentioned as being the 4-0 team. I think everyone's kind of been surprised by the position they're in, but people have been not sort of arguing, but always talking up as to whether they're really impressed with O'Connell and Sam Darnold in the offense, or whether it really is Brian Flores and the defense as being the sort of more impressive unit. When you've been looking at this unit over the last couple of weeks, what about you has really stood out?
I mean, I think it's so hard to ignore the defense, right? Just looking at what Brian Flores has done, I think what makes them so unique is they actually have, apart from their defensive line, they pretty much have everybody training in multiple positions. And sometimes within the NFL, you take a risk and you don't know if it's going to pay off. I mean, this is something that's not even in the NFL, in American football, so different to do, so that you have people who could fit in anywhere. I mean, we've seen them all up like 8 people on the line and showing that kind of zero blitz. And then they drop into a 2-2, and you've got your safeties playing in the corner position. It's just incredible. And I think it's like that beautiful genius that has been so fascinating to watch. But, if you look to kind of the other side of the ball with Sam Darnold, someone who's kind of had this second wind in life, this second chance. I mean, fourth, technically, we're talking about how many teams he's been with, but you've got Justin Jefferson coming over, who is one of the most iconic players in the sport. People do the gritty over here, that people do the gritty in multiple different sports. So you've got this really kind of cool cultural piece that comes with it. Jordan Addison's back playing great. I mean, this team is on fire at the moment.
And just turning to I guess to their opposition, we have to try and quell that fire, the Jets. Um, I think it's very interesting in the past 2 weeks. Two of the things that have kind of come out in the talk around the Jets have been around the relationship between Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers. And I was listening back to the Sky Sports Inside the Huddle podcast when Neil Reynolds spoke to Aaron Rodgers over the summer. I just got a sense that Rodgers was coming into this season with this sort of calm and perspective, and just trying to get the most out of all of his out of everything he had, knowing full well that this is a sort of rare opportunity put in front of him. I think the Jets have done reasonably well so far this year, but after what happened against the Broncos the weekend, I think they will really want to try and put a marker down in this game from the start. So what way do you expect Aaron Rodgers and co to approach this game? Do you expect them to sort of, I guess, counteract the aggressive defense of Brian Flores with aggressive offense?
Well, first off, I think you're so right. I think this is a huge game for the Jets and kind of a get right game. It's an opportunity for them to really kind of reestablish and push momentum in the other direction for them going forwards when they go back to the States. I feel like I'm so excited for this matchup of Aaron Rodgers in this offense versus this Brian Flores defense. I think if there's any quarterback out there who can really beat and identify what's happening, he'll be in film study. I think Aaron Rodgers is the guy to challenge this defense. And we saw a little bit last week when the Vikings, in that second half of the game kind of took their foot off the pedal a little bit. They started going a bit more basic and they just got picked apart. So there's a real opportunity for the Jets here. And they've got some great weapons, right? You get that, you reestablish the run game with Allen, with Breece Hall. Then you've got Garrett Wilson. I mean, this could be an incredible matchup. And we know that sometimes when teams come over here, you need that run game to get them going, right? To kind of establish it. You're on different time zones, different countries. So it's a really great way to kind of like build that identity again. And Aaron Rodgers, he's been here before, he's played here before. He loves it. And so I'm really excited to see him kind of just take in that atmosphere. I mean, I don't know if you were here when the Green Bay were playing. You remember when he ran out? I mean, the whole stadium went up in excitement and roar. Imagine what that's going to be like when he's back out here now with the Jets.
Yeah, I was in London that time. I remember walking past St. Paul's Cathedral and it was just full of cheeseheads. I couldn't move. Like
Yes.
actually, I physically couldn't walk the street. It was full of Packers fans from all over, from Wisconsin, from Westchester, from just about everywhere going. So I'd be interested to see because I think the Jets will have a pretty big fan base. Obviously, the connections between New York and London are deep, and Jets fans, whether they're in America or in London, they're loud, they're proud, and I think they know what this game means, and I'm really looking forward to the atmosphere. So before I move on to talk briefly about the other two games, just on your point about the fact that Aaron Rodgers has done this before, um, how much value do you put in players and coaches and teams having experience in coming transatlantic in terms of preparing for games like this? The reason I'm asking is because I compare it to during the college football classic here when Coach Brent Key was talking. He was basically like, come on, it's like basically playing coast to coast. It's not that different. And everyone's like, hang on a second. When the NFL play, everyone acknowledges the fact there's a big difference in how it's played. So I'd just be interested in your view as to how much experience in that transatlantic element sort of counts when it comes to taking the field on Sunday.
I think there's a slight difference between college and NFL just in terms of the schedule, the preparation. You know, the NFL side of things is way more intense, I would say, just from a day to day. Whereas college, you have classes, you have things like that that take up a lot of their kind of lives. So I think NFL rely way more on that routine, perhaps, whereas you're dealing with college students essentially. And so I can see it from both sides, right? You can just treat it like it's another day. Come on, let's get on with it. But I think when you're in a situation where you're really trying to play with that 1% advantage, I think it definitely does help to, keep routine as much as possible. I mean, we saw that with the Jags, right? So last year, them coming over for those 2 weeks, it really did benefit them. That was their upper hand. And truthfully, I think, I'm sure we'll get to this in a second, but I think that might be exactly what they need this time around too. They need those back-to-back wins to kind of set them off for success. And to just kind of go back to one more of your points around Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers, there's a lot of chat around these two right now. And I think that comes down to a conversation around accountability in terms of what's going on with this team. Robert Saleh, you bring in Aaron Rodgers, you think he's going to change the whole organization, which he does, right? He brings in the people he wants there, the athletes he wants there, he wants his team around him. So then when you aren't as successful as you think you might be, I think that's where you start to get that kind of pointing of fingers. Or so who is this on? Is it on the quarterback or is it on the head coach who's playing, calling the plays, whatever that looks like. So I think they're in a little bit of a weird period, and at some point one of those two are going to have to step out on top. I mean, ideally it's Robert Saleh or the owner steps in, but I think it's a kind of, again, an opportunity coming over here to kind of like get right, build that, team bond kind of piece of things, get that communication in.
Yeah, I imagine Jets fans are almost imagining the America's game when they see the London game as when the the head coach and the quarterback finally got fully aligned after two kind of tense weeks. And who knows, that could be exactly what happens, or maybe it could go completely the other way. Who knows? I'm sure Jets fans and football fans in general, we do really want to see I guess both men to kind of get the best out of each other. I'm going to move on a little bit to the Jags because we were talking about you were mentioning how the Jags going to use their experience playing London to help get their season back on track. I just remember from 2 seasons ago when the Jags kind of have an iffy start to the year, came into London, and that game in Wembley was like sort of put them back on something about that trip to London, put them back on track to a really good run. They ended up getting to the playoffs into the season. Similarly, last year, they came in, I think, as underdogs probably against the Bills. Got a victory there, got a victory against the Falcons, and had a really good run of it pretty much until after Thanksgiving when things fell apart. But regardless, their trip to London was a real kind of get right period. That built them into the rest of the season. I think it's fair to say that the Jacksonville Jaguars really need that right now. I mean, you see that the opponents are facing against the Bears and the Patriots. You think there's a good chance of them coming away from this 2-0, considering the experience, but also considering the teams they're playing against?
Yeah, I mean, they have every right to come away from these next couple of weeks with that 2-0. I think again, we're talking about head coaches and quarterbacks, right? That's kind of resounding at the moment when after last weekend's game, Doug Peterson coming out and pretty much saying, "Well, I'm calling all the right plays." That puts a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and I think that starts to speak around a lack of trust within the organization. And I think coming back to the UK, coming back to, where Shad Khan has such a big standing and platform over here as well, there's a lot of pressure on a lot of different people. I think that when the trust has been broken like that, this could be a great opportunity to rebuild those foundations. I remember everyone saying how great and refreshing it was last year, just kind of being able to, enjoy each other's company. And I think they do need a little bit more of that team bonding. It's not like you're going home when you're in the States after practice and, you kind of separate. So this will be a really key moment. But I mean, there are definitely some issues going on with the Jags on the field, right? I mean, I think we have to acknowledge that, whether we're talking about Trevor Lawrence and kind of, perhaps feeling things in the pocket that he wouldn't normally feel. He was spinning out literally in the Bills game when with no pressure around him. So things like that start to make you think that he's doubting what he's seeing. But you need to, we kind of always go back to it, right? You need to be able to establish a run game and you need to protect him. And if you can't do those two things, it's going to make it really challenging because actually, on paper, this is a really great team.
Yeah, I always found that interesting when looking back at the Jags. I mean, even last year, I felt like they had an over reliance on the talent of Trevor Lawrence. So fair enough, they've backed him with the money. I think there is a good core of talent there, but they just haven't chosen to run the ball enough. And I always found that very unusual. I mean, if you establish the run game, you allow yourself the options to like keep the defense guessing. And against that Robert Saleh defense, you're going to have to try and keep them guessing from the start. So I like. Oh, sorry, I'm getting my games mixed up. But against the Bears and the Patriots, regardless, you're going to still have to try and, I guess, try to keep things fresh. And I'm also interested to see if that aspect of it being a team bonding experience sort of lives on in that Jags dressing room. So, I think that this certainly will be key. And when we look against the Bears side, I'm not quite sure if they're under as much pressure because it's quite clear that they're still a work in progress in terms of their offensive line, in terms of Caleb Williams. Their defense, I think, is showing up to be pretty strong. So do you think that their approach when it comes to playing against the Jags, are they feeling the pressure on their end? I know we're still a week away from this game actually being, the next game up, as it were. But considering, I've always said that Caleb Williams kind of needed September to make mistakes and to not be the straight out of the gate star. Even CJ Stroud last year wasn't straight out of the gates, took him a couple of games. So I think the timing of this is quite nicely coming in that Caleb Williams sees himself come into London, playing in a cosmopolitan city, and maybe just, if not maybe leading to a win, at least showing the best of himself to a new audience and showing the world why he is the number one overall draft pick.
Yeah, and what a great opportunity for us to be able to see him, in real life, essentially, so early in his career. I think you're spot on. I think that week after week he's been improving, which is ultimately what you want to see from a rookie quarterback. You brought up CJ Stroud. I feel like last year, because he was such an anomaly in terms of his incredible ability coming in as a rookie, it almost changes how we view rookies coming out now. But there's so much learning that has to occur. And we're starting to see, Caleb Williams feeling a little bit more comfortable. It's been great to see, the Caleb Williams we saw in college making some of those incredible throws. I mean, his athleticism and his accuracy, his arm strength, all of that is definitely there. There's just been a bit too many times in the pocket that he's been uncomfortable and had to kind of scramble and make moves. So, I think this is a great opportunity, like you were saying as well. The defense is going to put him in a good position. They're going to continue to find ways to get the ball back to him. And that's what you have to rely on. Is trying to search those turnovers. That's such a big part of these international games. But again, we're going to establish the run. Both teams need to establish the run early on so that you are able to do more of that play action and have that kind of excitement and freedom that we all want to see from a kind of passing situation.
Well, I guess I'll touch briefly on the final, I guess, London team is certainly a team that will establish the run almost certainly. That is the New England Patriots. They will establish the run probably before they will establish the pass. I really enjoyed that when you were in Dublin for a live show we hosted, I think, before last season. It's speaking to you about your experience of what the Patriot way was and why I guess a lot of other teams don't like it. Of course, it's very different now. It's under new head coach. We're not quite sure by the time we get to this game in 3 weeks' time what the quarterback situation there is going to be. Is there going to be calls for Drake May to make his debut in Wembley Stadium? We don't know. But when you're watching this, the Patriots in general and how they've approached this period of transition, I guess. So what stands out to you? Is there something that you think that they've carried over from the Belichick era too much? Have they changed too much from the Belichick era? I know it's still early days, but what is your general sense of kind of where the Patriots are going right now, and maybe what we can expect by the time that they face off against the Jaguars in Wembley Stadium?
Well, I think with Gerard Mayo just being underneath Belichick for so long, like there are so many just key traits that he kind of takes from him naturally, right? When he's been his teacher for so many years, I think there's a lot of the great solid foundation. I think he just offers a lot of a better opportunity for like communication, for building a different culture within the building. And so I think when you go back to the actual like philosophy and belief system, I think it is very similar still. That kind of ground and pound, run the ball. We're going to make more with less. And whether it was watching him kind of upset in week one to seeing how they're playing now, I think still a lot of teams are trying to create their identities. I think we always kind of say, the first 4 weeks or so are spent trying to figure out who you are and really establish who you are. I think they're probably doing better than most people anticipated them doing, just because new head coach, and it's a lot of pressure to be the guy that follows after Belichick, who's been so successful for so long. I know a tough couple of past years, but I like what they're doing. I think that they're buying into what the philosophy and belief system and the culture is there. I just think they need a little bit more time together to kind of create that right environment and really just clarify who they are.
Phoebe, this is a great conversation. Thank you very much for taking time out to join us. Before I let you go, I just need to ask you one quick question, and this is all burning in the back of the minds, I guess, of Irish fans. I want to hear your view on it because we just had the Pittsburgh Steelers watch party on in Croke Park very recently. We're seeing all of these NFL games. They're going to London. They're getting bigger. They're getting more views. We know that there's games on in Germany. We're going to see a game in Spain next year. At what point are we going to see a game in Ireland? And maybe we're trying to manifest it here. I'm not quite sure, but I mean, surely the momentum is building either through the Steelers or through the NFL, or through fandom in general, that at some point Dublin is going to host one of these games.
Absolutely. I mean, look, we just got to speak it into existence. I mean, the college football classic's incredible there. The Irish fans know how to show up, and you know how passionate the Steelers are. They want to have a game over there. It's just a matter of making it happen. But Roger Goodell said himself, obviously the entire Rooney family have said it now too. I think it is definitely going to happen. When? I have no idea. I wish I had that secret intel, but I think we just need to keep speaking into fruition. Just keep telling them we need to have one preseason, in season, whatever it means, get the ball rolling with there, because I feel like the Steelers do think of Ireland as kind of a second home.
Well, I like that. I mean, the fact that we've spoken into existence means that it's no longer an if, but a when, and that's
Yes.
progress. I like that. I like that. Phoebe Schecter, I thank you very much for taking the time out, and I hope you enjoy this series of London games.
Thank you, too.